Hey everyone, Ben here and welcome to Motivation to Invest. How can you make money in property? Well, there are many different strategies you can use, and one of them is serviced accommodation or renting a property on Airbnb. Now, I personally used to run a serviced accommodation business. I ran this for a couple of years. I've been through the ups and downs with that business. I've made every possible mistake you can make. So in this video, I'm going to reveal to you guys my top 3 tips for actually running a successful serviced accommodation business. We're going to dive into exactly what this type of business is, this strategy is, the advantages and disadvantages of doing this strategy over just renting a house or an apartment on a long-term lease. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, guys, and you're interested in becoming financially free and learning more about investing, then why not consider subscribing to this channel by hitting that subscribe button and turning that notification bell on. And if you do find any value in this video at all and you appreciate all the research which has gone into it, then feel free to give this video a big thumbs up. That helps out tremendously with the channel. And with that being said, let's dive in. So firstly, what is serviced accommodation? Well, serviced accommodation is basically when you have a property set up to be rented out on short-term lets rather than on a long-term lease. So you're effectively competing with hotels, you're effectively running a bed and breakfast, very similar. So you could be aiming this at people who are going on holiday, vacation, maybe they're away from work. That's your target audience with serviced accommodation. Now, of course, Airbnb is the most popular platform to actually run this type of business on, but you also have booking.com, which many people don't actually know about. You can also list properties on there as short-term lets. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of doing a serviced accommodation business rather than just renting a property out normally? Well, the first major advantage is you can actually earn a hell of a lot more by renting a property out in the short term on short-term leases rather than on long-term contracts. And this is just for clear reasons. Of course, if you're renting a property out on a nightly basis, you can charge a hell of a lot more, and it'll be usually to people who are going for holiday, for vacation, so they're more likely to pay more, rather than somebody who's renting a property out on a long-term lease, in which then they'll be thinking more about their living costs and not really wishing to splash out as much. For example, I've got many friends who are actually running 6-figure serviced accommodation businesses with multiple properties, a full management team in place, a full cleaning team in place to actually run this business efficiently and smoothly. So the second advantage of this business is flexibility. You can block off certain dates and actually decide when you want to rent the property out. Of course, if you're running a fully fledged serviced accommodation business, you're going to want to be renting it out as much as possible or having it available to rent as much as possible in order to make the most out of that property and actually cover any downside risks. And that brings me neatly onto the disadvantages of running a serviced accommodation business. So the first is the risk. So it's a lot more risky than renting a property out in the long term. So let's say you have a tenant and they sign a 1 to 2 year lease on a property. You know, at least for that 1 to 2 years, you're getting that fixed guaranteed rental income. However, if you rent a property on Airbnb, a serviced accommodation business, you don't really know if somebody's going to book next week, the week after. Some major crisis can happen, like what happened in 2020, which really did affect a vast majority of serviced accommodation businesses. A few personal friends of mine who actually run these type of businesses, they converted them into basically quarantine shelters for the whole global pandemic. So people could actually go and stay in these properties in their own bubble away from other parts of society. So there is ways of actually being flexible, but still it does come with a lot more risk. And the second major disadvantage compared to a long-term let is it takes a lot more time, organization, and planning. You must be willing to put in the time to actually make a serviced accommodation business work. It's not as passive as a long-term let. You also must be organized. You must be good at planning. Remember, you've got guests checking in, checking out very regularly, perhaps every weekend, perhaps 3 or 4 times a week, perhaps 2 times back to back. And you need to be really organized and have the time available to do this. If you have a full-time job and you're working, you need to make sure that's a flexible job so you can actually go and maybe leave the job and actually check someone into the property, give them the keys, and then actually go back to the job. So it's things like that that you need to think about when running a serviced accommodation business, and you need to really make it a whole experience for the person who's actually staying in your property. So this brings me neatly onto my top 3 essential tips for success. And my first tip for success is the profit and disaster are all in the details. So running a serviced accommodation business is all about the details. So you need to really put yourself into the customer's shoes, walk yourself through the customer journey as if you're a potential tenant staying in the property in the short term. Perhaps you're renting it for a vacation, perhaps you're renting it for work. You need to put yourself in the shoes of that person to provide everything that person might need. And of course, you need all the essentials and all the basics there. And these are things which you can easily forget. For example, toilet rolls. Are there enough toilet rolls in the property? Towels. Are there enough clean towels? Have all the bed sheets been cleaned, ironed flat, and they're all back on the bed? Has the property had a thorough deep clean since the last tenants were in? For example, an interesting and common one which happened to me when I was running my serviced accommodation business is there was quite a few groups of girls who were staying in the properties. I was in a major city centre in Manchester. Quite a few people were staying in the property. They were going on nights out, and me being a guy, I didn't think about, okay, why would they need loads of coat hangers? But girls apparently need loads of coat hangers to hang up their dresses before they go out on a night out or out for drinks or whatever else it may be. And I personally didn't even realise that. And they would say, okay, why is there only like 2 coat hangers? And I'd be like, okay, sorry about that. But then obviously I learned the next time I added lots and lots of coat hangers in there, so they had more than enough to actually do whatever they need to do with those coat hangers. So it's things like that, the detail, which actually makes a difference between a good review on a site like Airbnb and a bad review. And believe me, if you get a few bad reviews, your account will be shut down. They're extremely strict right now, and your account will be shut down if the property isn't to a high standard. And that brings me neatly onto step number 2, and that's to do the numbers and plan ahead. So before you decide to start a serviced accommodation business, you need to assess the area where these properties are. Is this a vibrant area? Is this a good location which will attract a lot of people who want to stay in that location? For example, my favourite locations are major city centres such as Manchester, London, Liverpool. If you're in the UK, in the US, major cities also, or anywhere else in the world, because to me, they're great places for people to actually go and visit, and also great places for people to actually go to actually work from. So you're really hitting 2 target audiences there. But perhaps you don't have that privilege. Perhaps you're somewhere out in the country and you might actually decide that, okay, this property is only really suitable for people who are going there for a short stay vacation. And in that case, you need to kit the property out so it's actually targeting that ideal tenant. The key factor is you need to design a process, a check-in, a check-out process, a cleaning process in between, and somebody to actually hand over the keys. For example, if you're at the other end of the country, you need somebody truly reliable to actually hand over the keys to the tenant. For example, I was personally working down London. I was renting out a property in Manchester. I gave the keys to a friend to actually hand to the tenants. I said, okay, they can hand the keys to the tenants. It can't be that difficult. And they couldn't even do it. They ended up leaving the keys at a bar, and the people who actually wanted to go and stay in the property, they actually go to a bar, find this bar in the middle of nowhere, and actually get these keys to actually stay in the property. Now, that is not a good experience anybody wants to do when they want to check into a property if they're going there for a holiday or vacation. So that's something which you really need to avoid doing by planning ahead and having reliable people around you. And this brings me neatly onto tip number 3. You need to allocate time to make this successful. This is not as passive as a long-term let, but the profit can be a lot greater, but the passiveness is not as much there. So really, you need to make the time. If you're in a job, you need to understand it's a flexible job so you can come out and sort the property out. You need to have an efficient plan in place in terms of deep cleaning, etc. And of course, as I mentioned in point number 2, do the numbers, but also check the property rental in the area on short-term lets. Compare this to long-term lets to see if it is actually worth it for you. Some locations it will be, some locations it won't be. Some locations you'll have very high competition, some you won't. So you really need to compare it and see if it's right for you. And of course, the major benefit is you can earn a hell of a lot more. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on serviced accommodation businesses. So please do comment those below, guys. If you did find value in this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. That helps out tremendously with the channel. And also, if you guys want access to my full property investing course, which I'm giving away for free, guys, for every member of our stock investing course. And the stock investing course is probably one of the best in the planet in terms of teaching deep dive fundamental analysis for stock investing. So all that is available on my website, motivationtoinvest.com. You can check that out. You can read through the course contents. There's 15 units in the stock investing course, and you'll get the property investing course for free. This is a limited time offer only. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check out that first link in the description, and then private message me when you've actually signed up and become a member of the course. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a tremendous day, and I'll see you in my next video. Invest safe.